It's a farm in western Norway. It's the year 1000, and you are going to eat the same thing this morning that you ate yesterday morning, twice a day for 60 years. 2 meals, not 3. One in the morning and one after dark, and nothing in between, because there is no such thing as a snack. Old Norse even has the words for them: dagmal, the day meal, and natmal, the night meal. 2 named, and that's the day. And it isn't a roast. There's no roast. There is a wooden bowl, and in the wooden bowl there is gray, barley porridge with a lump of butter going soft in the middle of it, and sour milk poured over the top. That's it. That's dinner. And it is the single most important thing about these people that nobody ever tells you. Let me be more specific, because the word porridge undersells how completely it takes over. Barley is close to the whole story. It ripens fast, it survives a cool, wet summer, and this far north, it will give you a crop in years when wheat simply won't. You eat it as porridge, you eat it as flatbread cooked on a hot stone, and, we'll come back to this, you drink it. Around that, dairy, constantly. Milk, sour milk, whey, butter, cheese, and the thick, strained, sour stuff Iceland still eats and still calls skyr. Then, occasionally, everything else. Meat in autumn, when the animals you can't feed through winter get killed. Seabirds and their eggs, taken off cliffs by people on ropes. Berries in season, whatever the sea puts on the beach. And fish, properly, not as a garnish. Isotope studies on Norse bone can read roughly how much of somebody's protein came out of the sea, and for coastal populations, the answer is a great deal. In the Greenland settlements, it climbs steadily across the generations, until the last of those people are eating substantially out of the ocean. Cod, herring, whatever the water gave up. If you lived within reach of salt water, fish wasn't a treat either. It was Tuesday. That ordering is the opposite of the one in your head. Grain and dairy are the diet. Meat is the exception. And the exception is the bit they put in the poems, which is exactly why you know about the exception and not about the food. Because here's what we all picture: the hall, the long fire, the benches, a whole animal turning on a spit, a horn going round, somebody shouting. That's not wrong. That happened. It just happened the way a wedding happens, a handful of times in a life, and somebody else is paying. Viking isn't a people, incidentally. It's a job, and almost nobody had it. The man eating porridge next to you has never been on a raid and never will. He has barley and 40 sheep. I'll say it once and leave it alone. And while the cartoon is being taken apart, the bodies, we picture enormous men built out of roast meat. Measure the skeletons, and the average Norse man comes out somewhere around 1.72 meters, women a little over 1.58 meters, which is a shade taller than the medieval Europeans who came after them, and almost exactly you. Not giants. Well fed enough to reach a normal height on a diet of grain and milk, in a place where that was hard to do. That is the achievement, and it is a considerably better one than being enormous. Because day to day, the question isn't what tastes good. The question is, what can I grow at 60 degrees north, store for 8 months, and turn into calories, with no sugar, no oil I haven't rendered myself, no spice I can afford, and no way to keep anything cold in summer? Answer that honestly, and you get porridge. Every time, in every northern culture, independently for thousands of years. Porridge isn't a failure of imagination. It's a solved equation. So, 3 moves. 1. Grow a grain that survives up here and find a way to break it into something a human can actually eat. 2. Get hold of a machine that turns grass into food, because grass is the one thing this landscape grows in quantity and you cannot eat it. 3. Make the grain keep. And it turns out the best way to store barley is in a barrel, as a liquid. Grow it, Translate it, store it. The barley, the milk, the ale, and the state of everybody's teeth. Move 1. The grain and the stone that ground it. Barley first, then the object, because the object is the whole point of this section. Barley is the northern grain. It copes with a short summer and a bad one, and at these latitudes it yields when nothing else will. In Norway and Iceland, it's the staple, with oats alongside and rye further south in Denmark. Charred loaves have come out of the graves at Birka in Sweden. Small, flat, dense little breads, 9th and 10th century, still recognizably bread. And the rubbish from the towns says the same thing. The grain remains from Hedeby on the Danish border and from the Coppergate dig in York give you barley and oats almost everywhere, wheat as a minority crop, and a great many weed seeds mixed in with all of it, because nobody was cleaning a harvest to anything like a modern standard. But barley in a field is not food. Barley is a seed in a hard shell, and to eat it, you have to break it. Which brings us to the quern. A rotary quern is 2 flat discs of stone. The lower one sits still. The upper one turns on a wooden peg. Grain goes into a hole in the middle, and flour comes out around the edges. They turn up on essentially every Norse farm anyone has ever excavated. It is the most common piece of machinery in the Norse world. And somebody has to turn it, by hand, every single day, because ground flour spoils and whole grain doesn't. Not a weekly chore, a daily one, and one of the longest jobs on the farm. Rough numbers, an hour of hard grinding gets you a couple of kilos of flour. A household eating barley twice a day needs that every day, without exception, forever. Put the British minimum wage on it, call it £12 an hour, and the flour in one of their loaves costs about £10 in labor before anybody has grown a single grain of it. It was done overwhelmingly by women, and on a farm that had them, overwhelmingly by enslaved women. We'll give that its own episode, because it deserves one. Now here's the part I want you to actually know. The stones grind each other. Every turn of that quern sheds a fine dust of stone into the flour. There is no way to get it out. And you eat it, every meal, for 60 years. So go and look at Norse teeth. Look at the skulls. The molars are worn flat, not decayed, worn, sanded down to smooth stumps, sometimes right into the pulp. In one way, their teeth were better than yours, because there was no sugar in that world to rot them. And they were destroyed anyway, by grit, from the machine that made their bread. The quernstone isn't a kitchen tool, it's the machine that ate their teeth. Move 2, and this is the cleverest thing in the entire diet, though nobody involved would have called it clever. Look at what Western Norway actually grows. Not much wheat, no vines, no olives, barely any fruit. The Oseberg burial from 834 had a wooden bucket of small wild apples in it, and that's about the scale of Norse fruit. What this landscape grows in enormous quantity on ground too steep and wet and rocky for anything else is grass. And you cannot eat grass. Your gut can do absolutely nothing with it. So you get hold of something that can. A cow is a device for converting a plant you cannot digest into a food you can. So is a sheep. So is a goat. Grass in one end, milk out of the other, every day for months, without killing the animal. And that last part matters enormously, because a slaughtered cow is one large meal, and a milked cow is a small meal every day for years. The cow isn't food, it's a translator, and they translated it into everything. Fresh milk, which doesn't keep, sour milk, which does. Whey kept as a sharp acid liquid. The Old Norse is skyr, which preserves other food and gets drunk on its own. Cheese, butter, which is stored fat, and fat is the thing you run short of in a cold place. And skyr, thick and strained and sour, which Iceland has gone on eating under the same name for 1,000 years. Butter isn't a spread, it's a battery for fat. Put a price on that, too. A small Norse cow in season might give you a few liters a day. A supermarket sells you that for about £1. Theirs cost a byre, a winter's hay cut by hand, and somebody milking twice a day for 200 days. And nobody in Norway in the year 1000 worked out that grass plus a ruminant equals human calories. They kept cows because their parents kept cows, and the farms that managed more of them ate better. And that went on for 400 years. Not knowledge, iteration. Then there's the strange part. Most adult humans in history could not drink milk. The ability to digest lactose past infancy comes from a specific genetic variant, and it is not the default. Worldwide, most adults don't have it. In Scandinavia, almost everybody does, something like 9 in 10. So the population that built its entire food system on dairy is also the population equipped to process dairy, which sounds like a very tidy story. Hold that thought, because the tidy version may be backwards. Move 3. The barley again, but this time in a barrel. Ale in this world is not a treat. Ale is food. You malt the barley, mash it in hot water, boil it, ferment it, and what you get is a cloudy, low-strength, faintly sour liquid with real calories in it. Everybody drinks it. Men, women, children, all day. 3 reasons, and none of them is enjoyment. It's storage. Barley in a sack goes damp, goes moldy, gets eaten by rats, and by weevils you can't see. Barley turned into ale is barley locked into a form that keeps and travels. Ale isn't a drink, it's bread you can store in a barrel. It's calories. A cup of weak ale is a real amount of energy, and in a diet running close to the line for half the year, food you can drink while you work is not a luxury. And it's clean, because you boiled it. Now, I have to correct something you have almost certainly been told. The story goes that medieval people drank ale because the water would kill them. That is mostly a modern invention, and in Norway it's close to absurd. Norway has, and had, staggering quantities of clean, cold, running water. They drank water. Of course they drank water. Ale was never a substitute for a dangerous drink. It was a way of eating your grain twice. And mead, the one you've heard of, barely mattered. Mead is made from honey. Honey is scarce and expensive this far north, and mead is a feast drink and a poetry drink. If you were drinking mead on an ordinary Tuesday, you were extremely rich, or you were about to be in trouble. So what does it actually taste of? Not hops. Hops are a later arrival in the north, which means the bitter in Norse ale is coming from somewhere else. And the somewhere else is a shrub. Bog myrtle, sweet gale, a low gray-green plant that grows in wet ground all over Scandinavia, and which was still being used to bitter and preserve beer in Norway and Sweden centuries after the Viking Age. How far back it runs is partly inference from a later record, so take it as likely rather than certain. And that's your object for this one, not a drinking horn, a wooden cup and a fistful of leaves off a bog plant, picked by somebody who knew which bog. Their beer was flavored with the landscape, because the landscape was the only shop. Here's where I have to stop and be honest, and it's the milk. I've just told you that Scandinavians can digest lactose, and that they built a dairy diet. And the obvious conclusion is that the diet came first and the biology followed. That's the story I grew up with. It may not be right. A large study published in Nature in 2022 examined milk residues on thousands of pieces of ancient pottery and found something awkward. People across Europe were using milk for thousands of years before the lactose-digesting variant became common. The milk came first, by a very long way. So the gene did not simply spread because milk was useful. The current best guess is that it spread hard during famine and disease, when being unable to digest milk stops being a mild inconvenience and starts killing you. So the honest version is this. The Norse were dairy people. They were unusually well equipped to be dairy people. And the direction of the arrow between those two facts is genuinely unsettled and being argued over right now. I would rather hand you that than hand you something clean. All right, here is where this whole thing turns over. Everything I've described is food as fuel. Barley, milk, ale, twice a day for 60 years. But there is a second kind of eating in this world, and it has nothing to do with being hungry. Go back to the hall. The whole animal, the fire, the ale going round. That is real, and it is not dinner. It's a transaction. A chieftain has no police, no salaried army, no tax office, and no way at all to compel anybody. What he has is a hall and a surplus. So he feeds people. He puts on a feast, and the men who eat at it are, from that moment, obliged to him, not by contract, by having eaten. He hands out ale and arm rings, and what he gets back is loyalty he could not otherwise buy. The feast isn't a meal, it's a payment. And the roast animal at the center of it isn't food. It's a statement about how much you can afford to destroy in a single afternoon. And there's one detail that gives the whole thing away. They ate horse. Horse was food, and more than food, because horse meat was what you ate at a sacrifice, at the ritual feast in front of everyone. Then Christianity arrives, and eating horse becomes the thing that marks you. The law codes ban it by name. When Iceland converted around the year 1000, the deal reportedly came with carve-outs, and one of them was that people could go on eating horse for a while, which was closed off later. That account comes from a 12th century source describing an 11th century bargain, so hold it loosely. But think about what it means either way. A food got legislated because eating it said something about who you were. Nobody ever passed a law about porridge, which is exactly why you know about it. Feasts are what the poetry is about, because feasts are where the poetry was performed, to the people being paid. Nobody composed verse about the porridge. And hold all of that loosely, because almost every word of it was written down 2 or 3 centuries later by Christians about pagans. So 1,000 years on, the payment survived in the literature and the meal didn't. You've been shown the receipts and told they were the diet. So here's the picture, and then I'll get out of the way. It's a morning in western Norway, a low turf house with grass growing on the roof. Inside, a woman has been turning a stone quern since before it was light, and there is flour in a wooden bowl with grit in it that nobody can see and everybody eats. Barley porridge in the pot over the fire, a lump of butter going into it, sour milk poured over from a wooden pail, a cup of thin, cloudy ale beside it, because the same field made both. 2 meals today, this one and one after dark, nothing in between. Split fish drying on a rack outside, a cheese wrapped and sitting in the cold, a barrel of soured whey in the corner with last autumn's meat down in it, kept back for a month when there is nothing. And nobody in that room finds any of it sad. It's food. It works. It got these people to Iceland, to Greenland, and to Newfoundland and back. Not mead, not roast boar. Barley, milk, and a stone. Here's what I keep coming back to. Everything we know about how anybody ate comes from what somebody bothered to write down. And what got written down was the exceptional day. Our whole picture of the Norse is a highlights reel, composed by people who were being fed at the time. You'll eat something today that you eat most days. That's your real diet. That's what it has always been for everybody. The only difference is that nobody's going to write a poem about your porridge either. One question, and I genuinely like the answer. Barley, dairy, ale. Twice a day, 60 years. And you cannot add one single ingredient that doesn't grow at 60 degrees north. What are you making? And how long before you can't face it anymore?